Please stand clear of the doors. Por favor, manténganse alejado de las puertas.
Happy Monorail Monday, everybody. Glad you're back for another edition. If you're new to us, this is where we talk about a lot of years in monorails and working at Walt Disney World, and sometimes talk a little bit about my time at Universal as well. But today, we're talking about monorails, we're talking about Walt Disney World. And the first thing I wanted to show you, just before we get into what I'm mainly going to be talking about, show you one of these eyes and ears. Some of you may be familiar with this as a publication that was coming out every week for the cast members. And it would have information. This is a special edition, so it's a little bit different from what you usually saw. But it would cover things that were coming soon, a lot of stuff that these days, magazine publication kind of things, and even weeklies, the stuff is out on the internet and there's constant updates, there's rumor sites, everybody's speculating and secrets. But this was how cast members got a lot of information, or little blurbs, publicity things on the what's going on in the parks. And one to show you a couple of facts here. This is from summer of '91, so it's 27 years ago. And I'll just read off some of these facts. They have some things like the Village Marketplace in Pleasure Island. It was 155 acres. The parking lot was 6 acres. Accommodates 1,800 cars. Obviously, that was not nearly enough when they decided they need to expand the parking for Disney Springs. Parking had gotten crazy compared to what it had been in the early 90s, back in the 80s, 70s, when there was plenty of parking for everyone. So looking at a few other things here, the parking lot at the time, the Magic Kingdom accommodated 12,156 cars. Let's see, resort facts. Average length of stay, summer of '91, was 3 days. The average guest stayed 3 days in the parks. Way different now. I don't know what the number is right now, but it's got to be hovering around a week or more. I know some of the folks from the UK come and spend 2 weeks, even 3 weeks. Many other people at least spend 4 days, 5 days. There's so much to do and see. People are spending a lot more time as in resort stays, where they just don't even worry about going to the park and they just stay at the resorts and go to Disney Springs and things like that. So the number of days that people are going there has definitely greatly expanded. The Contemporary Resort opened in '71, 1,056 rooms. The rates effective at the time range from $170 to $365. $170 to $365 were the rates for the Contemporary 27 years ago. Gone up a little bit higher since then. These days you're probably looking at good 500, 600 easy on the low end rooms. The Polynesian rooms were running 180 to 240. When I was staying there with my family in the first couple of years that the park opened in the early 70s, it was reservations very backed up. You had to reserve about a year in advance to even have a chance of getting a room. And we paid somewhere like in the mid 50s. 52, 55, 60 or something like that for a night, and stay there like maybe 2 nights and 3 days. There's only the one park opened, and then everything around the lagoon and the beach stuff. So not nearly as much reason to stick around there for 10 days or 3 weeks or anything like that. But that seemed expensive then, and you had to reserve them way, way in advance. So just kind of an interesting little thing. We're just getting started. The Disney decade, that was brand spanking new. We'll talk about it in another episode at some point in the near future. We'll talk a little bit about the Disney decade, some of the announcements they made. Most people know the stuff that was announced, but I would probably like to talk a little bit about what it was as a cast member, hearing all this stuff and some of the things that were going on. And not all of it was pleasant. Not all of it was, oh, this is going to be the most amazing, magical thing ever. It doesn't always come off like that. Sometimes it's kind of, this is what's happening, you need to get on board. But we'll talk about that in another episode. So this episode, we're going to talk about the monorail operating cabs. Mostly guests are familiar with the front cab. If you've only been going to Disney in the last 10 or 15 years, maybe you've never ridden in the front cab of a monorail. But for many years, from the day the park opened until, gosh, I can't remember, 2009, it definitely stopped when there was the accident. But there was a couple of times where they stopped putting people in the front cabs before. Shortly after I left monorails, there was some issues with the load in the front cabs and some strain on the axles and the structure underneath the first car. And they kind of thought, well, having the people out in the nose, and sometimes we're getting way more. There were supposed to be 4 people in the front cab, a max of 4 people plus the driver. People are like, oh, but we got 2 kids, can't we put them up? And, you know, with our friends, and, you know, it always became more complicated, and people were always trying to rationalize why they could stick more people up there. So I think that at some point they finally just said, let's pull the plug temporarily and do some testing. They eventually allowed people back in the front cabs, and then of course when there was the fatal accident in 2009, that was the end of guests riding in the front cab. Now, as a driver, sometimes it was fun to have people interact with in the front cab. A lot of drivers did not like having guests in the front cab just because it was a distraction from driving. Sometimes getting in the cab, you just want to sort of just lose your mind and just drive the monorail and just not deal with people. And anybody who got up there was super energized. This is super exciting, and they would just hammer you with questions. So sometimes you spend an hour and a half in driving the monorail, and every person who gets in there just hammers you with a million questions. Is this the best thing ever? Oh my gosh, is this the best job ever? I used to have some amusing answers to questions because you get tired of answering the same question in the same way all the time. So I think I don't know if I've mentioned it in the Monorail Monday, but certainly when I've done it in the Instagram version of Monorail Monday when I was telling little stories, when they were building the bus stop out in front of the Magic Kingdom, and that was brand spanking new. All the buses were dropping off at the transportation center, and then you would catch the monorail over. And they finally decided they're going to build the bus stop up in front of the Magic Kingdom and take a little bit of relief off of the ferry and monorail, especially with all the new hotels that were being built at the time. Yacht Club, the Beach Club, Caribbean was already up, the Coronado, and all those hotels were being built. Tons more people. It was easier to just put those people right at the Magic Kingdom. So they're creating the bus station there, and also near the same time, not too long apart, they also built the chapel over at the Grand Floridian. And so we drive by the people are like, oh, what's that? What's that? And I told people the bus station in front of the Magic Kingdom was the new sewage treatment facility, and they built it right up against the park because it was a lot cheaper to have it right there and not have to run all the piping. So of course people were like, oh, that's gross. Why would they do that? You know, it's all about numbers these days. And then the wedding chapel, I used to tell people sometimes that was the new executive bungalow. Michael Eisner doesn't like to be bothered with a lot of people coming up to him when he's at the Grand Floridian, so they built this separate bungalow for the executives so that they don't have to deal with the riffraff coming around them. Of course, eventually I would come clean with it's not the sewage treatment plant and it's not the executive bungalow. But people would get really freaked out for a few minutes there thinking about that. So let's get back to the monorail cabs. So what you were allowed to do is you're allowed to put up to 4 guests in the cab to ride with you to the next stop, around for a loop. On the resort side, they could ride around 1 lap. So when people wanted to ride up front, they would ask a cast member, hey, we'd like to ride up front. And it's okay, sure. And we'll put you up front. And they put you up near the loading gates near the cab. And you'd have to wait. If you were on the transportation center to the Magic Kingdom, Next train comes in, you just get on front. Or maybe you wait a train or two if there's other people waiting. The resort beam was always much more complicated because you don't know where people are getting out. They could be going from the transportation center. It goes to the Polynesian. There's people waiting to get on the front at the Polynesian. Sorry, it's already up here. And they go to the Grand Floridian. They get off. Now the people who were waiting at the Polynesian for the front, they just got on the train. Now these people get off the Grand Floridian and they're like, well, can we come up now? Well, no, because we board from the station. We don't take people from the monorail train up front unless there's nobody waiting at the station. Otherwise, it became chaotic. Then everybody's racing out of the train going, can I come up front? Can I come up front? So we basically tried to keep it where if you were waiting for the front, you needed to wait at the station. And that way, the people who are loading the trains can say, these people are next. You got room up front, they can get on. And that kept it a little less chaotic than it was if you were taking people just from in the train. It was always fun to ride in the front. It was a unique perspective. I used to say people loved riding because just it was a unique view. I used to say if we turned the monorail sideways and it was going sideways and the cabs were on the side, everybody'd be begging to ride on the side. Nobody'd care about riding in the front of the wide train. So the other side, the back cab, is not for guests and never has been for guests. In the back cab, a monorail cast member would sit back there and just sort of keep an eye on things as the train was looping around the track, and you had your driver for their drive time. You'd have a back cab person who just basically rode for that drive time, an hour, hour and a half. And they would just sort of keep an eye on things, make sure things are going okay. At the station, they would get off, take care of the doors, maybe help with any wheelchairs. At the transportation center, they might take care of the unload doors while the driver took care of the load side. And that would help make things go a little faster. It was much more important with the Mark IVs and the individual doors. You could open each car by itself, so you could open just one car's worth of doors, and they all click open, or you could open all of the doors. So you could, say, oh, we just need to open the first two cars, or you could say we're going to open all the cars. And you open all the car doors, that's a lot, that's 24 doors to be shut on one side. So what would happen is the back cab would usually get out and help take care of that and run up and slam half the doors. The driver would slam the other half of the doors. That way you could get the unload side cleared out a lot faster, get the monorail going again. Sometime in the early to mid 90s, they removed the back cab. They decided it was all about cost cutting. So the back cab person was eliminated from the trains. But it was, gosh, that was a great position when I was there. Everybody liked the back cab. Sometimes you'd have people who might give up their drive time when they were driving just because they didn't want to deal with guests. They didn't feel like dealing with whatever the afternoon testing. Every afternoon we had MAPO testing, which was testing the monorail's block signals to make sure it could detect a monorail in front of it. Sometimes people didn't want to do that, just weren't in the mood, you had a headache, whatever. Sometimes people would give up a drive time. Nobody gave up a back cab time, because that was basically, you sit back there, you're mostly in by yourself, you don't have to deal with guests, you don't have to communicate on the radio, you just get out every stop, help close some doors, hop back in. Back then it was no newspapers, no books. When it was winter and you had a big heavy coat on because it was cold, everybody had a newspaper or a book or something stuck in there. And as soon as you were clear of the station, out came the book. I'm going to sit here and read for a minute or two, read a newspaper. And then when you pass, so you enter the Magic Kingdom station, hide that newspaper so nobody can see it, so the supervisor or a lead doesn't catch you reading your newspaper or your book. Go load the people up, get in, read your newspaper a little bit more. So that was something used to pass the time a lot in the back cab. They were very forbidden, but people always were smuggling stuff like that in the back cab, or had a friend, sort of sneak a newspaper in where the supervisor wasn't around, so that you could have something to read, especially if you're going to Epcot. Because you got like almost 10 minutes till you're going to have to get out of the train and unload again. So people always want a little something to read or do in the back cab. Really, really enjoyed the back cab times. Sometimes you'd have guests popping open the door and trying to help themselves in the back cab. They're just like, oh, let's just go sit back here. No, that's not how it works. We'd always have to, go back, kick the people out, get back into the regular, no, you can't sit back here. And the two cabs are identical. You can operate out of either end, depends on which beam you're on. If we're taking trains back to Monorail shop, let's say you're in the transportation center on the express loop, you're going around counterclockwise, you're going around the Magic Kingdom. Maybe you go to the Magic Kingdom, shut off the train, you'd switch ends. Get out of cab 1, you go to the other cab, turn on the monorail, go through some real quick checklists, make sure everything's running right, and you're going the other direction. So when you would go through the switch to go back to shop, and the switch is between Contemporary and Magic Kingdom, it's that spur that you see that goes by Space Mountain. You go by that switch, you'd always take the train off in forward when possible. So you would switch cabs and go through the switch so that you could see where you were going. And of course, when you're pulling in a shop, you're seeing where you're going. So it was useful to be able to switch between the two cabs. The two cabs were identical, other than just being called cab 1 and cab 6. So that's just a little summary of the front cab, back cab. Do you have any memories of riding the front cab? Comment below. Let us know your memories of riding in the front cab. When I was a kid, 71, 72, I rode the front of that monorail and I said, I am going to be a monorail driver. This is awesome. I have to do this. And eventually I got to do that. So it's definitely very cool. It's a little sad that you can't ride up front anymore. Next week we're going to talk about some training, monorail training. I got some hold points and all about learning to drive the monorails, learning to load the monorails to the platform. We go over some training materials and show you some checklists and things like that. Training new drivers, new platform cast members to work in monorails. Come back next week for that. That's going to be really fun. So thanks for joining us. Be sure to comment, like, subscribe, share, tell your friends. And most importantly, remember kids, have a good time all the time.